Welcome to Diversity in Central Ohio, a program of the Columbus Community Relations Commission and of Mayor Michael B. Coleman. This show comes on we're live the third Wednesday of every month, and on every Wednesday night you can see at 7 o'clock a program of the Community Relations Commission. Over the last month, indeed, some would say even these last years, there's been a rash of very public violent gun shootings of people doing everyday things at an Aurora, Colorado movie theater, at an Oak Creek, Wisconsin Sikh house of worship, and at an apartment a few blocks from Texas A&M University. So tonight we will be discussing the impacts of these events in Central Ohio. And we invite other persons in our community to call in tonight to share your thoughts with us. We want to hear from you. We want to hear the impacts that we have here in Central Ohio of things that are going on in our country. This past weekend, we had the Central Ohio Sikh community had a memorial service for the victims, the families, and even the family of the alleged perpetrator. The Ohio Council of Churches issued a statement to support that community in its walk through this tragedy, and also the Ohio Coalition Against Gun Violence geared up to address the policy and political questions. So we have three wonderful panelists here today that will help us talk about this in our community and let us know more about what kind of things we need to be thinking about, what the impacts are, and what are the action steps that should be taken. Sitting next to me is Dr. Taranjeet Bhattalia, who is the president of the Interfaith Association of Central Ohio. He's also on the governing board of the Sikh community for the America region. That's correct. Welcome, Dr. Bhattalia.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here with you all.
Also, the Reverend Rebecca Tollefson, who is the executive director of the Ohio Council of Churches. She represents mainline churches throughout the state of Ohio, and actually there's some interesting things going on in terms of your organization speaking about gun violence. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And then we have former Ohio State Representative Harris, Marion Harris, who is now in a new position, exciting new position, as the executive director of the Ohio Coalition Against Gun Violence. Glad to have you, former Representative Harris.
It's a pleasure.
We're so glad to have you on the program tonight to talk about this important topic for our community. But I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about who you are, and if I haven't said everything about a proper introduction, where you are with this situation, and give us your definition of diversity. What is diversity to you? And I'll start with you.
Thank you, Nelson. Let me begin by saying that I came to Columbus 23 years ago. And Columbus has been a wonderful home for me and our family. We wouldn't live any other city. This is the longest city I've ever lived in, so this really is what home feels like. I am a research scientist in civil engineering department at The Ohio State University. And as you mentioned, I serve as the president of the Interfaith Association of Central Ohio that consists of official representatives of 8 different religions in the Central Ohio region.
8 different religions?
Yes.
Okay.
And the organization works to promote more understanding and respect in this community and make a difference right here where we live. I would add to that my perspective on diversity is celebrating differences. I don't think that we all are the same or can be the same. However, to me, celebrating diversity is to be able to come together, understand each other, and appreciate what each of us brings to the table, and then be a more wholesome society rather than saying we all agree on the same thing, which I don't think we necessarily do. So it's about community building for me.
Okay, thank you.
The Ohio Council of Churches is made up of 18 Christian denominations across the state of Ohio. and we roughly represent 3 million members and 6,000 congregations. So it's a vast, I would say, a rich diversity. I would define diversity as different as well, and variety. I see it in positive terms, in terms of richness. I often will use the phrase, we are a rich tapestry as the Ohio Council of Churches. From African American traditions to peace churches to Greek Orthodox to Roman Catholic to mainline denominations. So it's this huge spread of different denominations, and a constant is encouraging people to learn about one another, because even within that group, they don't really understand how each other operates or basic beliefs and traditions.
Great. Great definitions. You have a hard act to follow.
Well, I'm with the Ohio Coalition Against Gun Violence, and I do have to make one slight correction. I'm not the executive director. I'm the organizing director. Our executive director is our founder, Toby Hoover, who 39 years ago lost her husband to a gun. And she worked with churches in Toledo and grew this organization from one person to now 2 people. We have a challenge, our side, in terms of those people who are working against gun violence. We don't have the finances, we don't have the resources that the other side has, but we work hard and we really care. We are primarily an educational organization, an advocacy. We follow the legislature, the bills that are going on. We try and, I will do a little advertisement. One of our goals is to get these cards posted in as many restaurants and bars as we can. It's legal. It says that if you're carrying a concealed weapon, you cannot come into this establishment. So that's one of the things we do. We're also working, there's a bill that's pending in the State House right now that would allow concealed carry on campuses and daycare centers and churches. And we're following that very closely and hoping that that doesn't go anywhere. As far as diversity, 2 definitions, a little d and a big D, okay? Little d is me. I started out as a physiology major in college, graduated college, worked for a while in medical research, then went on to be a daycare teacher and worked at a daycare center. Then I went on to get into politics through the parents of someone in my daycare class, and went to work for Howard Metzenbaum, who was a great senator back in the 70s and 80s, and who I got a lot of my liberal progressive ideas from. And then went to work for Dick Celeste. Then I was a volunteer coordinator. Then I was an event manager. Then I worked in a library. I worked for the Mental Health Association. And now here I am. And I was a state representative.
A true Renaissance woman.
So, I look back and, when people say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I haven't decided yet. In any event, diversity, I would certainly agree with the definitions. We're all different. Everybody is born with differences. We develop differences as we grow. And the challenge is to bring all of our differences together in an inclusive way so that we all can grow and benefit from everybody's differences. So,
great definitions all. And we just want our audience to join in the conversation with us tonight. So if you're there, please call us at 614-645-6557. We want to hear from people throughout the community about the impacts of these recent events. Taranjeet, let me come back to you. Certainly, all 3 of you, friends of the city, friends of the Community Relation Commission, and you in particular, a friend of members of this panel. We certainly want to express to you and your community our sorrow about what has happened. And we know that there was a memorial here in the city of Columbus for the victims and the family. But we wanted to express our sincere wishes for peace in the community, and wanted to ask you to share with us a little bit about who is the Sikh community in Central Ohio, and some of the impacts that you see that have happened to the community about what happened in Wisconsin And we can talk about what impacts we saw in Colorado and other places, but we thought we'd start with you to talk about what impacts have happened here.
Sikhs have come to the United States about a century ago, primarily on the West Coast to build railroads. However, in Ohio, Sikhs primarily came to study, to get education at universities like Ohio State University. And they would get their education, they would go back to the home country many Sikhs came from, particularly was India. Till about the 60s and the 70s, when Sikhs started to settle. You know, these professors, they would become professors at universities, would get comfortable, their families would live here. But I think for many of them still, when you ask them where is home, home was still somewhere else. And in that sense, it's fascinating that our religious community has changed significantly. This is home now. The community has grown in size. When I came here 23 years ago to Columbus, there were probably about 30, 35 Sikh families. We all would know each other. And now we have over 200.
200 families.
200 families, yes. So the amount of diversity within our religious community has increased, and so have the numbers, which is a great celebration and speaks to two things. One is that we ourselves are very comfortable as a religious community living in this community. Second, this community is very welcoming. Yes, we have incidents that happen of hate and prejudice, but this community still is a very welcoming community that we feel to be safe in. So I think we do need to compliment the Central Ohio community for being so welcoming that it has been.
And could you say a little bit about the faith? Because part of our goal is to help people in our community understand more about the wonderful diversity of religions that we have in the Central Ohio area. To be Sikh, what does that mean? What is the faith about? And what are the primary things that you'd like the community to know about you?
The Sikh faith began about 500 years ago in the South Asian region of Punjab, which is in the north of India and also the part of Pakistan. It was undivided Punjab. That's where the faith began. Our founders of our faith emphasized the unity of humankind, the oneness of God, and service to humanity. And that still even today is a continuing challenge for us as human beings to be able to live that out. As a part of a religious tradition, we have a distinct religious identity which requires men and women not to cut hair on any part of their body. And men like myself will typically cover it with a turban, and women will typically cover it with a scarf. So that makes us stand out. So what I would say is that I don't wear my faith on my sleeve, I wear it on my head in some ways. And that makes us very distinct as a community. Yet at the same time, we feel that as a community, while we are different, we are still part of the mosaic or the fabric of America. And that's a struggle I think we are in as a nation and as a community, that there are those who may look different, and they are still assumed to be that they are foreigners or somewhere from outside. But when we look at ourselves, we don't see ourselves as being different than the average. So if you ask me if I were to walk in the streets of Columbus, do I stick out as a sore thumb? Yes, I probably do, but that's not how I view myself. There's not a single festival. The city has had all these Latino festivals, all these festivals that come up, and I have been to almost every single one of them and feel very comfortable there.
That is the beauty of Columbus in Central Ohio.
It is. Yeah.
This welcoming.
Yes. And so our place of worship is on the west side of Columbus. We refer to it as the Gurdwara, and that's where we gather for worship every Sunday. And the incident that happened in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, was on a Sunday in which the Sikh community, we have a continuous reading of a scripture which we consider to be the Word of God, and it includes verses from Hindu and Muslim saints. So it is the founders of our faith and the saints from other religious traditions. There's a continuous reading that we have that goes on for 48 hours. And that was in progress. It began on Friday morning and was to end on Sunday midday. as the reading was going on is when the person came and began to shoot outside and then inside the Sikh place of worship. And this coming on the heels of, while less than 2 weeks ago, while we were still mourning as a nation and as a community of what happened in Aurora, Colorado, is extremely tragic.
Yes.
People have asked me if this tragedy is senseless. My first initial reaction to the tragedy was that this is senseless. However, when I see it in the context of what happened in Aurora, in context of incidents that happened since that time, for example, there was a mosque that was burnt, I think the Monday morning following the attack at the Gurdwara, and this happened in Missouri.
Yes.
There's another mosque that was shot at a couple of days ago in Chicago. So it seems to me at this point that there seems to be a pattern. And that concerns me quite a bit, and should concern people of all faiths and people of no faiths, people of conscience. We all need to be concerned about that. While we haven't seen that in Central Ohio, the concern persists that there may be copycats who may be able to do something in our community, and that's why it's important for us to come together as a community and say that yes, this is us together, and we will stick together and work together to make this a better place for all of us to live and work.
Right, and if I may,
Yeah.
the fundamental issue is guns. We've had several potential copycats. We had this guy up in Cleveland who went into a theater an hour before the show and sat in the very back row in the middle and had a bag, and the security guard suspected something, and he had a loaded pistol and several magazines. I don't know what he would have done, but it looked awfully suspicious. There was a gentleman down in Alabama who was also threatening his boss, and they found a whole arsenal in his apartment. We have to do something to get guns off the street, to make it harder to get guns, because guns are what kill people. It may be motivated by racism or by religious reasons or just craziness, but we've got to do something to get the guns out of the hands of people who misuse them.
Well, we'll spend some time talking about that a little later.
I just want to interject that representing a large Christian community, what the Sikh religion, some of the basic tenets are basic tenets for many of the rest of us. Love God.
Most of the world's religions.
Working for the betterment of all humanity,
Yes.
Seeking peace and justice. I mean, and so it's not this awful religion that's terrorist or bad stuff. I mean, it's basic to what we all believe. And I think that their tenets are important for the rest of us. We need to learn about one another, how we are common. There isn't, I mean, yes, there's lots of differences, but there's a lot more common. And that's what we need to celebrate in terms of our diversity.
So learn more about the commonalities that we share,
Right.
rather
Instead of
than
being
looking
fearful.
of the differences that
Right.
we
Right.
might see.
I would agree with Rebecca is saying is that the essence of various religions is very similar, but the form and the way through which we live it out is different.
Yes.
But that difference is something we need to celebrate. Imagine if there was only one kind of rose in the whole world and only
Very
one kind of
boring.
flower. Very exactly. And so the diversity helps us to be enriched as a community.
Well, Rebecca, let me go further, because your organization has sent a letter to the Sikh community.
Well, we didn't send a letter, but we
You
called
did,
for.
You did more than that.
Yep. We called for a Sunday to be a time of prayer, hopefully in congregations across the state of Ohio. And we took it from my colleague in Wisconsin with the Wisconsin Conference of Churches. So many other state councils were asking, let us be in prayer with our brothers and sisters of the Sikh faith.
During there was a national memorial. Was that a national memorial?
There was a national vigil that was held.
A vigil.
But there wasn't as such a prayer service or
Okay.
memorial that was held.
So I went representing the Ohio Council of Churches last Saturday and appreciated being invited. And just to say that we weep with them. I think as Christians, We need to dispel myths that are out there. I think we have a responsibility to learn about different faiths and traditions instead of that fear factor.
And affirm our brotherhood as people, all of us together.
Yes. Affirm the humanity of each of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is important to emphasize here, this incident is not the one that brought Rebecca and me together.
No.
I, in fact, have a copy of what actually brought us together, is the book, Religion in Ohio. For the state's bicentennial, Rebecca, me, and several others worked together on this book, which was published in 2004.
4 years of labor.
4 years of hard labor, that's right.
It's hard to write together.
Yes. And so when this incident happened, the bonds of friendship and community were already in place.
Right.
And that's, I think, the lesson for us is that when there's a fire, we can't start digging the well. The wells have already been dug. We already work together quite well as a community, and we know how to support each other when times of conflict or difficulty come forward.
So let me ask the question. Families here in Central Ohio knew some of the people in Wisconsin. There were connections of all kinds in your community?
There were just a few that I'm aware of, but I don't think anybody had a good friend or a relative that I'm aware of in our local community who passed away.
But as a psychology is the area I studied. I know that when things like this happen, certainly in my history, the African American experience, when something happened anywhere to one of our group, it would cause vigilance. It would cause. I certainly was very saddened. There's a sadness that comes about the reality of our country and our not only our country. This is not just a U.S. problem. I found out in doing a little research, it's a world problem. There are lots of nations. I mean, Norway recently. I mean,
Right.
Brazil. I mean, we could start naming some of these places that have these same problems, but the U.S. stands out because of its fascination with violence,
With guns.
and guns, with our video games and with our media. So I'm glad to hear that education is an important part of the work that needs to be done, because we do need to reach places where people fear differences and fear that because somebody looks a little different or doesn't speak in the same way, that's a reason to exclude them and to not let them be in.
Well, my experience has been when I'm with somebody who's different, my own faith is enriched. So I want to encourage people to reach out to someone who is different of another world religion, because I guarantee you're going to find your own faith strengthened and enriched. I mean, instead of just being with somebody who's like me, that's pretty boring. So I want to be with people who are diverse, who are very different than me. And so I grow in my appreciation, and we go back and forth in terms of learning.
Well, that's certainly been a hallmark of the work that you do for the Ohio Council of Churches.
Thank you.
Bringing people who are different together and helping them to work together. So that is a learning that we need to do within our religious groups,
Right.
between communities. Certainly our mayor has goals of making this the best city in which to work, live, and raise a family. And the Community Relations Commission wants to build a community for all. So, before we talk about those action steps, let's just talk about our community. Columbus and Central Ohio has something going for it compared to other parts of the state and maybe this region in this welcoming. We're seeing lots of new groups coming continually now to Central Ohio. Where does this welcoming come from that we have here? Any of you might be able to speak about this.
Well, I moved here from New York back in 1971, and I can just speak personally. It was very welcoming. I mean, I made a life. I ended up being a single parent. I don't think I would have survived nearly as well had I still been in New York. People are just friendly and giving and accepting and warm, and it's not like nothing else that I'd experienced before coming to Central Ohio. It's I remember a cover on Columbus Monthly magazine many years ago. It said Columbus, a wonderful. What was it? I wouldn't want to visit, but I'd love to live there, or something along those lines. You know, not a great place to visit, but a great place to live. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's changed because it's a great place to visit now. There's so much diversity and so many things that go on in this community. But I've just valued and treasured all the people that I've met from every walk of life and and running for office, meeting all the different people that I met. It's just, I don't know, I'm not being very articulate, I don't think, but I just felt welcomed. I felt accepted.
And Rebecca, you're also someone that came here from another city or another part of the country. How did you find Columbus and Central Ohio?
As I settled in, it was, I like being in a city because of the rich, differences that there are. And I think Columbus we can model how to be a good community because of perhaps this type of cultural folk here and that type, and, you know, just the blend. It's not the salad bowl piece. I don't particularly care for that, but just a richness of the differences.
So it seems to me that yes, we're working well when we're in places together in this community, but you also have the ability in this community to have your community with you. So it seems to be working in Columbus in a special way.
People that I met came from somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we developed a commonality that was Columbus, you know, that was unique to our experience here. But I can remember thinking, isn't there anyone who's been born in Columbus? You know, everybody seemed to be from somewhere else. But that, I think, contributed to what we have here in Columbus.
Well, let me ask you while we're with you, and we want to remind our audience to call in. And we have a caller now. Before, I'll save that question. Okay. Let's hear from our caller. Caller, are you there? And do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, this is Toby Hoover with the Ohio Coalition Against Gun Violence.
The founder.
Yes.
We spoke of you, and your organizing director spoke highly of you. Welcome to our show tonight.
Thank you so much. And first, you know, I have to please extend my sympathy to all of the people in the Sikh religion. I have found it so interesting that the very people that were targeted on this kind of violent action a week and a half ago are the most peaceful, loving people, and could teach some of us, you know, some good lessons. And so I do want to extend my sympathy to them for having to go through this violence.
So tell us, founder, what is your organization? We heard a little bit about your story, but what do you want to say to the community about the Central Ohio Coalition?
Well, I think first, you know, what I would like to say is listening to the program as it has been going on. I found it so interesting and right to the point of what we try to do, and that's to do away with the fear, because it is people's fear that makes them take these angry actions and use weapons. We have people that think they're going to protect themselves in the world, and they're walking around, but some of them are very angry and they commit violence, but a lot of them are afraid, and fear causes a lot of different emotions, and most of them are not very good. So everything that I've been listening to as far as saying, you know, that we should know more about each other, that we shouldn't be fearful of somebody that isn't just like us, is, I think, right to the point as far as trying to control violence. And what we do is we educate and we advocate, and we are, you know, called to give public awareness to all of Ohio, which is kind of difficult to do, but we really try to do that and make people realize what's going on, not only in the legislature, but in the news, things that they can do. What we like to think of is that we can take control of our communities. It's up to us, and we can be nonviolent, and we can say, put the guns down. but everybody needs to do it. And so that's what we encourage, and that's what we do. And so we do it in a lot of different ways, and we encourage people, to join us and do that. I would like to say that right now, one of the things that we are doing is we are working with our colleagues in the state of Wisconsin. And if you go to our website, people can send their wishes and their sympathy to the Sikh community. They can add their name, and the group in Wisconsin is going to deliver all of those to Oak Creek. So if somebody is inclined to do that, we welcome them to join that, and that's at ohioceasefire.org.
Well, you've raised some wonderful points. I hope I can call you Toby. Thank you for calling in to us, and hopefully you can stay on the line a little while we talk, because I want to ask you and Marion how Ohio fares. How is the state of Ohio when it comes to our work around gun violence?
Toby, do you want to take that?
Every year the Brady campaign gives states different grades for the number of laws they have. And this is the other biggest thing, I think, as far as what our job to teach people is that people think there are a lot of safeguards out there and a lot of laws, and Ohio usually gets an F because we don't have very many laws at all that keep our communities safe. And, for instance, people think that there's licensing, registration, background checks on every gun sale, and all of those are not true. And so we look at those things, and we shouldn't feel quite so glum about the fact that, everybody is checked out before they have a gun, because that's not what we're seeing. A good portion of guns every year are bought without any background checks, which would certainly help us to keep the guns out of people's hands that shouldn't have them. I think that there are a lot of things that keep happening in our state house that is sort of not in tune with what I'm hearing, especially from your guests tonight, about what we could do to be a less violent society. And instead, they're passing things and passing laws that just allow more and more guns everywhere. So it's very, very bothersome for us, because it's not going to make it a better world for any of us.
Here, my colleague Tom Smith, who's the Director of Public Policy, just wrote his legislative brief about gun violence, how it can be sharply reduced in the next 4 years. And it's interesting that in the 4 days after the July 20 shooting in Colorado, there was a 40% increase in requests to purchase a firearm. And with when Gabby Giffords was shot, the next day sales jumped 60%. So I think we need to pay attention to the fact that these incidents cause more and more requests for guns.
And that goes back to the fear that Toby was talking about. Right. People are fearful, and they feel that the only way they can protect themselves is with a gun. And statistics show that that is not true. People who are killed by guns are generally known to one another. People say, well, if they're...
in our families and in our close associates.
Exactly. And our children. We've had several incidents recently, and just in Columbus, a 3-year-old who found a loaded gun on a TV and went to play with it and killed himself. And Mama said, he knew he wasn't supposed to play with guns. And then the 14-year-old whose best friend shot him. It was an accident. Playing with Grandpa's gun. He knew to take the magazines out, but there was a bullet in the chamber and killed him. And can you imagine what that youngster is going to have to live with for the rest of his life? Right. I mean, it's more than just the mom. And
well, it seems to me as we talk about this that with that fear, so the Christian Bible says fear hath torment. So people who have fears about others, fears that that they cannot resolve, resort to these means. So it seems that we're going to have to address guns as one part of this picture, but this other piece is what I hear you talking about: getting to know one another, learning to not be insecure because you're in the presence of difference.
Right.
I think part of what happens is, particularly, well, when you talk about the Sikhs in Central Ohio working for the university, they're affluent. And there are people that in our country that have not reached the level of social, economic level that they have wished to reach, and they see others doing that, they feel, again, insecure. So there are a lot of insecurities that lead to these fears in our community that I think we have to address that as well as the gun issue.
Well, we also have to look at the fear that people like I have. I mean, 3% of the people in this state have concealed weapon permits. 97% of us don't. Wow. I'm afraid if I go into a restaurant or a bar that someone sitting next to me might have a concealed weapon, perceive a threat, and I get in a line of fire.
Yes.
I mean, I have a right not to be afraid.
I'm being told that I need to, Toby, I'm going to need to release you so that others might call in, but would you like to have a last word here before you leave us?
I guess only that, if people want to see the end of violence, I hope that they will, listen to your guest and work on the fear, getting rid of the fear, and join us to do something about the guns. And please do send your wishes to the whole Oak Creek community, and because they have gone through something that will stay with them forever.
Thank you, Toby.
Marion, maybe you could give your website, because if someone wants to know more information, and what I'm hearing is not only do we have to be concerned about the fear of the person who is potentially a perpetrator, but our fear of taking a risk or being out there as a community. We're going to have to address the fears that we have. I mean, there could be a reaction where we don't go anywhere publicly. Right. There's so many things that persons who use this kind of, they're trying to strike fear in the hearts of people who are worshiping or going to movies or going, serving eviction notices.
Right.
We have to, as a community, come together on this to support one another.
And have to convince people that fear doesn't mean having a gun. People say that, some of the pro-gun people say if someone had a gun in that theater in Aurora, they could have pulled out their gun and shot the perpetrator just like that. Well, that's not the case. I read an article by a former policeman who said there's no way. You have a movie that's full of noise, you have a smoke-filled room, you have chaos. What if you'd had more than one person who pulled a gun? Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? These people, at least in Ohio, they have 10 hours of training. They're not trained to react in that kind of situation.
And even a situation in Oak Creek, this police officer was shot 9 times.
Exactly.
Yes.
A police officer who was trained to do this, was trained exactly for this purpose. How can the average John or Joe, be able to do this?
Exactly. And I fear for our young people, because the number of young people killed in 2008, 2009, 5,740 children and teens were killed by guns in this country. The one that horrifies me even more than that, because I was a preschool teacher, is twice as many preschoolers were killed by guns as law enforcement officers in the line of duty. I get goosebumps just reciting that, and I've said that at least 100 times in the last couple of months. It's the guns, folks,
So that's what we want to spend some of our time talking about, as from your positions where you sit in your faith community, in the organization that's a coalition against gun violence. What are the steps that people need to take in their community? What are the things that they need to do? What do we need to do in our faith communities? Do we need to reach out to other communities? What do we need to do? What are the action steps?
One of the things at the Sikh place of worship on Saturday was each of us who spoke were given a little folder with some basic pieces about the Sikh religion. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me that that was a really helpful piece, and I wish churches would embrace an education time of learning about different religions. And it's like, I think we get too, we don't want to take too much time to learn about other religions, but it's a reality of our society today. And for those of us in the Columbus area particularly, but I think rural folk need to learn and appreciate, I would encourage that, the different religions as well. And our Christian scriptures talk about loving our neighbor as ourselves, and also to welcome the stranger.
Yes.
Real basic of who we are as people of faith and in the Christian tradition.
And I think that the houses of worship, whether they're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Sikh, whatever, have an opportunity with children to teach conflict resolution, to teach alternate ways to deal with conflict. Because we've got, I talked to an academic at a conference who was talking about gun violence, and I said, are we going to see the end of this in my lifetime? And he looked at me and said, no. And it really is going to have to start with getting our children. And there's some good programs that are working on the streets of Columbus, that are working with the gangs through the mayor's office, through other organizations that are trying to go and convince these young people that guns and drugs are not the way to go. And these are usually young men who have been in the prison system, who have experienced, so they're kind of respected by the gang members or seen as peers in some way. But we've got to at least consider the children and raising them.
I want to add, there's been a success story at the national level. There had been a coalition several years ago, a faith coalition against smoking and tobacco use, and that was successful in advocacy work that needed to be done. And that coalition, that work, a lot of that has been done. And there's a new coalition with the same groups that have come together that my own national organization, World Sikh Council of America, is part of, is Faith United to Prevent Gun Violence. My fear, Nelson, is that this fear is going to keep feeding into itself with the national elections coming up. And that is my ultimate fear, that things I don't think are going to get any better over the next several months. After the election, they may get better. Maybe you have, is there a perspective you have on, and you've been on the other side of the aisle also.
25 years ago, the NRA was not big bad gun people. They promoted gun safety courses in schools. They weren't opposed to all the things that they're opposed to now. And I think the gun manufacturers and the NRA now are not necessarily reflecting their membership, because I saw a poll of NRA members who over 90% said, well, yes, we need to get rid of assault weapons. We don't need assault guns. Over 90% either thought that we already had complete background checks, or if we didn't, we should. So you don't see the NRA, who I think right now is reflecting the gun manufacturers rather than their membership. They're fighting that. When I ran, I didn't even bother filling out the questionnaire from the NRA, because I knew that they weren't going to endorse me under any circumstances.
So we've got to look more at the interests of our community and the constituencies than we are prophets.
But you also have to push. You have to push your elected officials to take a stand. You really do have to make sure, make them take a stand. And that, I know that the Brady campaign is doing that. The Mayors Against Illegal Guns. There's a number of groups who are doing just that, signing petitions, sending letters to the president, to Governor Romney, to our elected officials in Ohio. We have to make them take a stand and a position and say, why do you support hidden weapons? Why do you support handguns? What's your rationale for it? And being afraid of the NRA is no reason. I'm sorry. I would rather lose an election than, and maybe I did, because my opponent was endorsed by the NRA and is a concealed carry advocate. Yeah. So who knows? But So
it's a complicated. So I'm also hearing it's a very complicated picture, and there is tremendous polarity right now in our political process.
Oh.
Many would argue gridlock. Christian leadership. What are Christians? Are you seeing patterns in other cities and states or around the world when you talk with other Christian leaders about this issue?
In terms of
well, the majority would be Christian in this community, in this nation. I mean, it seems to me that the church ought to get behind this issue,
right,
to really cause change to happen.
Yeah, I haven't researched, individual denominations to see where they are, but my sense is that they would be for more control of in-gun laws, that type of thing.
That's been my experience working with national groups, that most of the Christian denominations would want to see better gun management. The challenge that I think might be, it hasn't gotten down to the pews. That the higher leader church affirms it. Advocacy is done, but when you talk to folks down at the pew level, they still, are in favor of very little, if any, gun management or gun control. And so I think the work, Miriam, that you do is so important, that you work at that level, the grassroots level, which is where we need to reach people. Whether it's gun control or the fear of religious differences, it's still the same. I think it applies in both cases.
Where it's frankly very frustrating and very challenging, because I can get people to sign our petitions, but to get them to do something. I just sent out a volunteer request. I had some events that I wanted to go to, and I couldn't go to all of them, and I didn't get a response from anybody. People are saying, "Oh yeah, I'm against guns," but get them to write a letter to the editor, or call their state senator or their state rep, or come out and help me pass out these cards, to restaurants and things. It's hard to get them from the talking to the doing. That's my challenge, and that's what frustrates me every day, because I'm a doer. I get tired of just talking.
So if people want to contact your organization to volunteer,
they can go through our website.
Right through your website.
Yep.
And the website
and
is?
I'll give that again, www.ohioceasefire.org. And they can volunteer, they can donate, they can sign up for our newsletter. They can get all that information there.
Now, what about the faith groups that might need training, or is your organization available to them?
I have been to a number of churches, to their social justice committees or whatever they call them. I have a PowerPoint presentation where I, talk to them about the facts and the numbers, and I get all emotional and and hope to get them emotional as well. And again, they sign up and they take a card, and hopefully they get them posted at a restaurant or a bar. But I wish we could get groups of people together, and say, okay, we're going to go out and demonstrate. We're going to go out and, I know that one of the state reps, I just got a notice today, is having a town meeting, and she happens to be a card-carrying concealed weapon carrier. And I would love to have 10 people there, talking to her and asking her, and what are you going to do about the violence? What are you going to do about gun violence? It's just hard to get people motivated, and maybe through the churches.
Well, I think that we see that, though, too, that the absence of action is very prevalent. My colleague Tom encourages people to write to legislators and to come and learn about this or that, and it's just, we just can't get challenge. People, even for a day, legislative advocacy day, to bring people from around the state. We just don't show up. Yeah. So we've become like lethargic, I think, to not only the gun issue, but other issues in our society. So
people are feeling much more pressure now and feeling more isolated, I think, in our communities. So I think that contributes to some of this fear and the isolation that people are feeling. I mean, financially now, people are having a hard time. Lots of, not everybody, but certainly there are people that are struggling. And you mentioned this. You mentioned something about Ohio that it got brought to my attention. We're here in Central Ohio, but a lot of Ohio is rural.
Yes.
So even though there are 4 big cities, a lot of the people that would need to get involved very much are out in these rural areas.
And there's so much misinformation. I mean, the Second Amendment has just been misinterpreted and used in so many ways that are just not really right. I mean, no one is against hunting. If you want to have a gun to hunt, I mean, you talk about rural areas. They think that if you do anything to outlaw any kind of gun or limit any kind of gun, it's going to eliminate all of them. And you know, the Second Amendment is open for interpretation. The Supreme Court has already said that. It's the same as the First Amendment. You have freedom of speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded room. So the Second Amendment is not the end all and be all. And it's worded so poorly anyway, it's really hard to interpret. But it's almost like a reflex, you know, that you just say something and you say, oh, the Second Amendment. Don't you believe in the Second Amendment? Don't you know? It's very frustrating.
So we're going to have to get deeper in the conversation than just the surface issues.
Yeah. I have this thing, which I'm happy to share with all of you. This 10 myths about gun violence in America. You know, people, they say, well, guns keep us safe. Well, no, they don't. Statistics show that they don't. You don't need new gun laws. We already have some. Well, Toby listed those things that are not covered by our gun laws. You know, all of the arguments that people throw back at you, we can.
They're not substantiated.
They're not substantiated by facts.
The facts.
No.
So there's a lot of mythology and a lot of
right.
really lack of awareness about the real problems.
I mean, like one of them, that very few federal laws regulate the manufacture, sale, or possession of firearms. Do you know that there are more rules and regulations governing the manufacture of a teddy bear than there is for a gun?
Well,
I mean, really. I mean, I have a poster up on my display board that, you know, all of the rules that you have to have with the kind of filling you use and what's safe for kids and all of this kind of stuff. But manufacture a gun, you don't have to put a trigger lock on it. You don't have to make it child-proof. You don't, you know.
Well, I guess that's shocking just to hear, and it says how much work we have to do. And the United States has had a rich history of violence and guns. So I think it is going to take quite a bit of effort here. Let me ask about coming back to our community, the Sikh community here in Central Ohio and in Wisconsin, and people that are hurting. One of the things I've read in the news is that there are people reaching out to help people. And not just from the Sikh community, but from other communities as well. Can you talk about what kinds of things are happening that you see? Are people in Central Ohio trying to reach out in a group way or in individual ways to help the families?
The Oak Creek Sikh community has set up a website at which donations can be made for the victims and their families. And on Saturday, when Rebecca and many others were with us at the Sikh commemoration, all the contributions that came that day have been forwarded by the local Sikh community or the Gurdwara to Oak Creek, and they continue to take donations. I would recommend that you consider donating through your own favorite charity to be able to get the help that needs to be done. In particular, I do want to raise that there is also a fund set up to help the family of the officer who were shot in the line of duty, and we encourage folks to also contribute to that effort. So when we look at the victims of what happened is the officer who was shot, as well as those who were killed. And in some ways, we also look at the attacker himself. He himself was a victim of hate and prejudice. So we need to be able to pray even for peace for that person, individual, and his family. In this, it impacts everybody in the community is impacted by that.
And since we're getting down to our last few minutes, could you share, the Interfaith Association is going to be having its annual luncheon later this year, and that's a place where people could come to hear more about different faiths. So could you say a bit about that annual event, which is a wonderful event in our city?
Thank you. The association organizes an annual meal event every year, and this year is our 20th annual meal event. Since it's going to be on Sunday, October 14th, at the Boathouse, which is the new name at the Confluence Park, right downtown Columbus.
The Boathouse now?
Yes, it's called the Boathouse now, that's right.
Okay.
And since it's so close to the elections, we have chosen the theme to be Interfaith Unity in a Politically Charged World. And a speaker is Dr. Michael Flam, who is from Ohio Wesleyan University. And there's more information about the event at the website of the association, which is www.iaco.org, like an Interfaith Association of Central Ohio.org.
That's great. And now, Rebecca, what about the Council of Churches, and what kind of events are you having, or is there anything? Now, you did a major convocation on the topic of race. And I was fortunate enough to be in that group that participated with that. What else is on the table for the Council of Churches this year?
Our next Ohio Ministries convocation in January is we are bringing in Brian McLaren, whose latest book is A New Kind of Christianity. So it's kind of pushing the edges of how we think about our faith, what needs to change, kind of what has worked, isn't working. Younger people are choosing other ways than plugging into a particular tradition, if you will, a Christian tradition. So that's one of the big things coming up that we're doing.
So I guess the final thing I want to get us to talk about, and we've only just got a few more minutes, is the youth that you're concerned about. The youth. And I know in my community, young African-American men are dying in our neighborhoods.
The leading cause of death among black youth are guns.
Is guns.
Yep. And between 15 and 19 years old, the leading cause of death is gun. Is
That's
firearms.
just a stark reality. So there needs to be effort here in our community, African-American communities, Latino, all the communities. Because young men who are feeling frustrated, particularly if they're having difficulty with education or getting jobs in our community, which, a lot of people are having those problems now,
right,
might resort to some other kinds of conflict resolution that's not positive.
Well, I think the mayor's office is trying very hard with their task force on gang violence.
Yes.
They've got people out on the street, as I described before, excuse me, who are working one-on-one with young people and trying to give them alternatives. Unfortunately, there's not always alternatives. A lot of these young people have grown up in a culture of violence. They've got brothers or sisters who are in jail or who have, guns are a natural thing. And so it's a challenge.
Well, any last thoughts? This is, we're going to wrap up here. This is an important conversation. This needs not be the last time we talk about this. This concern has been going on, it's been growing. We ask that people in your faith community or in your organizations can contact these groups that we're talking to today, these panelists, through their organizations to get help. If you see a need in your community, or if there are ways that you want to reach out and be a volunteer, there's plenty of room in the political area to make an impact. This would be a great place to volunteer, to work, to do some things to help our community.
And if I could say, if every time you see a report in the newspaper about someone being shot, write a letter to the editor and say, we need to get guns off the street.
Good idea.
I would agree that we are only as secure as the least amongst us. And so we have to work together as a community, and that's the only way we can come out of it together. Otherwise, all of us are at risk together.
Dr. Battaglia, Reverend Tollefson, and Director, I should say, Harris, thank you so much for being on our show tonight. And we hope this generates some conversation in our community about safety. Join us next time for another episode of Diversity in Central Ohio. We look forward to seeing you. Thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.